Hey everybody, I'm Chris Metzler, Director of Programming here at SF Indie Fest. As you might have heard, we're celebrating our 25th anniversary of bringing some of the more interesting, unusual, and irreverent films from around the world to the San Francisco Bay Area. You've just had a chance to see the really interesting, cool film, The Affairs of Lidia, and we're lucky enough to have director Bruce LaBruce here. Nice to meet you, Bruce.
Hey, nice to meet you. Hey, everybody.
It's been cool to watch many of your films over the years and kind of stumble upon this new one. What was the kind of genesis of coming up with this idea, and this was the kind of the next film that you wanted to make?
Well, I just, my previous feature, San Narcisse, was kind of like a bigger budget, and it was, we were interrupted by COVID, the pandemic, in post, and then finally finished it, and we premiered it, in the midst of the pandemic. And I just felt like, for one thing, that I really wanted to make another movie fast, and during COVID, I don't know, I sort of wanted that experience of what that was like, because I have friends that were making films, and so it was just kind of in the spirit of, fuck it, we're gonna make this movie regardless of what's going on in the world. And Erica Lust, who had made 3 short porn films for Erica Lust, which is a Barcelona-based ethical feminist porn company, they approached me in, I guess, about the August of 2021, if I would like to make a porn feature for them. My previous 3 films had been about a half an hour long, and they wanted something more like 90 minutes. And so I proposed this idea for them in the something set in the fashion industry, because I've always wanted to make a movie about fashion or set in the fashion industry. I love fashion films. I love 70s fashion films and 60s particularly. Like The Eyes of Laura Mars and Puzzle of a Downfall Child, and Who Are You, Polly Magoo, and Mahogany, and Blow Up, and all those kinds of movies set in the fashion industry. So I wrote a script for them, and they liked it, and we shot it at the end of the year in 2021 and posted it at the beginning of 2022, and it premiered at the Buenos Aires Independent Film Festival of Bafisi in March of 2022.
Well, and what do you think is about the fashion industry that just like a great place to set a story based on drama and just the kind of exaggerated, I guess comedy that is available in there?
Yeah, it's kind of like a bedroom farce almost. But I mean, for me, it's like a kind of affectionate critique of fashion. So there's a lot of, jokes, insider jokes about the fashion world, and I poke some fun at kind of the wokeness of, fashion brands trying to be woke is kind of comical in itself, because they're often so wrong in so many ways, just like the way anything from like the impossibly skinny models to the kind of like plastering of brand names all over people's bodies to, whatever. There's so much to make fun of in fashion. But I love fashion. I mean, I just did a fashion shoot for Dust magazine with Manu Rios, the star of Elite, and we're using all like designer clothes and everything, and so I participate in the fashion world myself, but it's always good to have a healthy kind of skepticism about these kinds of corporate entities that exploit porn, exploit people in fashion. And it's the same with the porn world. I make porn films and participate in the porn world, but I'm also very critical of the porn world, and I make fun of it all the time as well.
Always good to have a good sense of humor in that way.
Yeah, I mean,
think
there's a lot of absurdity.
I mean, I wonder, from kind of a filmmaking perspective, when you're writing a script like this, you know, the kind of on-scene drama in the sense of how, like, are the sex scenes scripted in the script, or is it more of one of those things where you're kind of blocking it out and figuring it out on set? Like at one point in time, like how much of it is not impromptu, but how much of it is kind of figured out with actors live versus, what you write in a screenplay?
Well, we made a softcore version and a hardcore version of the film, but they're shot at the same time.
Right.
So when you shoot the sex scenes, you shoot them in such a way that you make sure you have enough coverage that doesn't show like penetration, or that is kind of a more kind of like, edited version of the sex. But in terms of the sex scenes themselves, I mean, it was a full script. So in terms of the narrative content, but in terms of the sex scenes themselves, it's changed a lot, like very rapidly in terms of how you shoot actual sex scenes because of the Me Too movement, and now you have to have an intimacy coordinator. It's totally de rigueur. This is the first time I ever worked with one, and so you have someone specifically dedicated to making sure that everyone is comfortable on set, that everyone knows exactly what they're doing, what their limitations are, the chemistry between the actors, who's comfortable with what positions. There's all sorts of stipulations, and now it really does have to be all done when you're working with a big company like Eric Elastic. Yeah. It really needs to be all predetermined. Like you can't on the set, you can't say, okay, now I want you to do this, like spring something on them that wasn't predetermined with the intimacy coordinator. So for me, I've made a lot porn since the industry porn since the late 90s, and like with professional porn actors and porn companies, and we always did that anyway. My producer and we would always sit down with the actors and have those discussions before we started shooting, but it was a little more loosey-goosey in terms of like asking people to do things spontaneously. So it does take a little bit of the spontaneity out of it, I would have to say, but it's all good. I mean, it's done in the spirit of consent and just making everyone feel that they're not being asked to do something they're not comfortable with.
Absolutely. You've made a lot of interesting films over the years, and I think there's kind of a, there's so many different types of stories and genres, but like, is there something that you think is kind of a through line that you see through your work, or kind of just kind of a certain attitude or perspective that you think that you bring to each film?
Well, I mean, I started out, in the punk scene in the 80s and queercore. So, and my films have always been, most of them have a sexually explicit component to them. And so that's a through line that has run through most of my work. I'm very interested in the idea of fetish. And so quite often I take a fetish as the starting point for my movies. So my movie, Gerontophilia, which is about a boy who has a fetish for the elderly, and my film Center Cease, which is about a kind of twin fetish, sex between twins. So I quite often take that as a kind of starting point. And so that pertains to the Affairs of Lidia as well, because there's kind of some very fetishy kind of scenes in it, like Lydia vacuuming you know, in the tiny kind of negligee outfit is very much based on sort of penthouse kind of fetish imagery. And but I'm adding a satirical element to it, and but which runs through my films as well. So it's like one thing I often do with my films is I critique something and kind of embrace it at the same time. So it's almost like a kind of process of it's a bit like a dialectic approach, I would say. And so, like, for example, my film, The Raspberry Reich, it's you could read it as a kind of critique of radical chic, of a kind of a pastiche of extreme left-wing radicals who take extreme politics as a kind of fashion fetish. But I still believe in a lot of the radical kind of postures that they take, and the kind of the radical ideas that they espouse. But at the same time, I critique the way that they don't practice what they preach, or the way that they kind of like contradict themselves. So in that sense, Lydia is the same strategy that I always use.
And have you had a chance to have folks in the fashion industry had a chance to see the film? And I'm sure there's been some good laughs. Have you heard any kind of commentary about it? Or
yeah, not so much. I mean, I haven't actually looked it up that much to see. You know, I did talk to some friends in the fashion industry and show it to them, and they were totally into it. I mean, you know, all the game of fashion, fuck, marry, kill that they play at the end is pretty irreverent, and it kind of skewers some sacred cows in the fashion industry. And then you know, the character that Sean Ford plays, the owner of the dress shop, he you know, he's a pretty funny character. He has a new perfume called Consent, and when he opens his dress shop in the morning, he turns the sign around from closed to woke, and he kind of uses woke the way that the same with like radical chic when I'm critiquing the extreme left wing. He kind of like is the same kind of character. I mean, he's so devoted to fashion and so sincere about it, but you know, whatever, he takes the woke movement as kind of just another opportunity to sell some more product, you know. So
and then as wrap up is, you know, as kind of porn has become more mainstream, or at least you know, more easily accessible over the years, has it kind of changed the way that you've approached like that sort of storytelling, or has it kind of raised interesting creative challenges, I guess, to kind of you know, tell the stories that you like to make?
well, you know, it's kind of a lot different with porn. I mean, one of the reasons I continue to make porn is it kind of like makes, beside the fact that I totally support pornographers and think that there are artists and filmmakers who deserve equal respect to people working in the more mainstream, you know, film industry. But you know, it's just a matter of freedom. So quite often I make these films because I can really get away with a lot of stuff that I couldn't maybe in a more mainstream filmmaking context. But you know, the pandemic, and it changed a little bit with Lydia, because the previous films I made with Erica Lust I had more freedom. Like I did some pretty extreme kind of scenarios. One was called Refugees Welcome, and it was about a punk in Berlin who has a relationship with a Syrian refugee, and there's kind of religious iconography in it that they generally wouldn't, that they generally kind of avoid, but they let me do it. And after the pandemic, people are a little more proprietary. They're about their company and what they can sell. You know, it's a little bit more it's a little bit more unstable, and so they want a very specific product, and I did work with them and kind of within certain limitations of representation that they wanted, which was fine. But yeah, generally, you know, the process is the same. I mean, I wrote a script that I was really happy with. It was actually really great, because after the pandemic, I was feeling a little blocked, and I sat down and kind of wrote the script in like a week and a half or 2 weeks or something, and it really kind of flowed, and it was really fun to write a comedy, and yeah, that whole process is pretty much the same whether you make porn or you make a more mainstream film.
Well, very cool. Well, thanks again for sharing the film with us, Bruce, and always interested to see what you're up to next. So keep us posted, and thank you very much.
Cool, my pleasure. Thanks for programming it.